Hello, welcome to Mowgli TV. Today we're going to talk about one of the unsung heroes in what refers to effects within Resolume. While for most people a good effect is one that completely twists and changes your content, for me personally I like effects that I can use creatively in a controlled manner to achieve results that I'm looking for in a very specific way. For me, one of these unsung heroes is drop shadow. Here's a quick snapshot of what you're going to see in this video. At its most basic, all that drop shadow does is duplicate your content based on its alpha channel. That means that any areas that are transparent will be ignored, and whatever's got some pixels on it will be duplicated underneath, and you've got control over certain parameters like its location, its color, its transparency, etc., creating the illusion of your content having a drop shadow, making it lift from the background and giving it some depth. Having said that, drop shadow can create things that are out of this world. It can really enhance your graphics. It's an invaluable tool to actually create things like extruded text, and extremely powerful when you're creating generative content to really enhance it, give it a lift and give it that extra edge. Before we get into more advanced matters using drop shadow, let's get into it and look at its most basic parameters. So we've got this basic composition, which has got a layer here with a text block, and then underneath I've put this solid color, which is a dark gray, so that we can see our darker shadow on it. So then we've got our drop shadow here, which I'm just going to turn on, and as you can see, it's basically taking the content from our text, shifting it slightly and adding it a bit of blur. So let's go through the parameters. First, you've got your opacity, which does exactly what you'd expect. Then you've got the distance, which is the distance from the source. So that means how far from the original content the pixels are going to shift. So if you increase it, you can see how it moves away from it. The angle is the angle in which the pixels from the drop shadow are going to travel as you increase the distance. So as you can see, you can rotate it around the content. Then you've got your color, which is very self-explanatory. The spread, which is basically the amount of diffusion that the drop shadow will have around its edges, or the blur if you will. And the strength, which works in conjunction with the spread, so that you can achieve sharp edges or more blurry ones. This is all, of course, extremely useful for things like I've got in this example, just something like your text, but it'll be good for logos. Basically, any content with alpha will do this. It doesn't work that great if you're putting full-on video that takes the whole frame, as it won't actually do much at all unless you start using auto mask on it. But the results may vary depending on your content. Things with geometric shapes and defined edges will be a lot better than anything that's got more diffused edges. Another very straightforward use for drop shadow is to do the inverse of what we've done here. So if I turn my next clip, you can see that here we got the inverted version of it. So basically I've turned the text to a black color, which is the same as the background in this case. And the drop shadow settings, so basically with an angle of 0, that means that it's going to be centered and a bit of a distance to make it move away. So basically you get this kind of stencil effect. With a bit of work, this could easily start looking some stencil lettering, for example, especially if you pick an appropriate font, stencil kind of qualities to it. So again, a very simple but straightforward use for drop shadow. Moving on, if you start animating parameters within your drop shadow, you can create all kinds of funkier effects. Like if we take what we've got here and do something very similar, but just animate a parameter, you start getting this kind of thing, which gives it much more of a 3D feel to it. Now, at this point, let's talk about what light and shadows actually are. Lights and shadows are what gives human perception the impression of depth together with perspective. If you study art, drawing, painting, that's what it's all about. It's all about having darker areas, lighter areas, and the interrelationships between them create the illusion of depth. That's how you achieve the effect of 3D surface on a piece of paper, for example. You can look into the traditional art practices like Trombley and an artist like Maurice Escher to get a feel for what I'm talking about. It actually pays off to learn these things when you start doing any sort of visual work, because that's how everything really works. So you'll be in control of what you're doing and it'll be easy to achieve certain effects. I see a lot of questions out there on the internet on how to achieve this kind of holographic effects, and it's all based around these principles. So it really does pay off to do a bit of research about these things and just be curious, look into it, start drawing. Back to our Resolume composition. So yeah, we've got this shadow, which I'll show you the settings of it. So basically the angle is being animated, so it's rotating around our text, which gives this trippy kind of effect which simulates light moving around an object, casting the shadow all around it. The fact that this is not actually a shadow but it's the opposite, it's a light, gives a nice contrast with the lettering on top, giving it the feel that the lettering is actually embossed, which is what brings us to our next ways of using drop shadow. So if I use this one here, I've used a stack of drop shadows. This is a really good way to use drop shadows. Don't stick to one, stick as many as you need. So if we go round, let me reposition this so we can see a bit more of what we've got here. So we've got our text as we had before, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 drop shadows here. So let's collapse them. And if you just switch them over at a time, you can see what they are all doing. Basically, that's our black text, and that's the first one, second one, and third one. It's true that there's some control over similar things within the text block. I like to use them in conjunction. They look slightly different, and they do slightly different things. If you go to your text block, you've got your glow in, your glow out, and your outline width, which right now is set to orange. Let's see what that looks like. So as you can see, if I bring the width in, I can give it that extra edge, and suddenly that changes the look of our text radically, from this kind of fiery glow coming off there with a slight hint of like a 3D embossed kind of look to it, to give it a bit more of a solid kind of feel to it. You could play with the colors and within all these drop shadows and the combinations of how much they diffuse or how little they diffuse, if they've got sharp edges, they've got blurred edges, and achieve all kinds of really cool effects. This is an example with a colored background, a drop shadow under the lot doing an actual drop shadow, and the whole thing having this 3D feel. So you can see that you can easily create 3D looking objects from flat things with stacked drop shadows. This is the big takeaway from this video, I guess. A good tip when you've got something like this, maybe, so you've got your different color drop shadows aligned the way you want them to give highlights, lowlights, and then a drop shadow, and you really like the look of it, it's very easy to just save this clip somewhere. You can have a devoted composition file that's got all your effects on, or however you might want to do it, and then it's very simple to copy effects and paste effects onto something else, so you've got this for later use. Once you've created one of these stacked effects of drop shadows, you can reuse it throughout your work whenever you want. So that's a good tip to remember. Now going back to this, once you've got something like this created, it's not very hard at all to turn into something like this. So obviously a very different effect, but it's based on exactly the same principles that we had on the previous one. Let's have a look at what's going on here. I've just animated certain parameters in each one of the drop shadows. So the angle is animated in that one. The angle is animated in this one with an added envelope on it. You get the idea. Just by animating different parameters within each one of the individual ones, you can get all these really dynamic effects going on very, very simply. There's so much depth to what you can do with this that I haven't really got time to talk about it in this tutorial, but I think you get an idea of what the potential behind this actually is. Let's now have a look at other more advanced things that you can create with drop shadows. I'm not going to get into the details of it because some of this stuff is going to be coming out later on. I'm going to be releasing a series of premium tutorials where I really get into the depth of how much you can actually create within Resolume. I'm just going to give you some eye candy for now. So obviously this has got a bit more than just drop shadow in it, but the bulk of it is created using drop shadow. As you can see, you can create very advanced effects with it. You've got an example of some generative content, which again has got some shapers and a lot of other stuff going on, but the bulk of this is created with drop shadows. As you can actually see here, there's a big stack of them, and that is what creates all the coloring within this composition. Another one you've got right here. So again, most of this is created using drop shadows. I hope this insight has helped you to see the potential that drop shadow has within Resolume to create all kinds of things, not just the straightforward drop shadows. As always, please like and subscribe, as it really helps me carry on doing these videos. Any comments down below are welcome. If you want to suggest any future tutorials, please do so. And if you want to be informed about my upcoming premium tutorials like the one you can see on screen right now, which will be very, very in-depth to create extremely advanced effects entirely within Resolume, follow me on Facebook so that you can be notified when this happens. I hope you make the most out of this tutorial, and I hope to see you next time.